And if you do want a copy of it, you will need to contact either me or Janice. My email address is lisa@visionating.com, and I will get you a link. I will be posting it on my YouTube. So if you are interested, I will get you a link to that. Maria, it is absolutely fantastic to see you. I'm excited that you're here too. Awesome.
Glad to be here.
So this is about to begin. Coach Connections puts on through its accountable network a whole slew of free financial coaching opportunities where you can log in to a session like this and talk money and finances and relationships about money. And one of the topics is about money and your business. Every Thursday at noon, I host an event like this. My name is Lisa, and I am the Velocity Detective. I am so excited to see all of these entrepreneurs out there that have enough passion and drive and belief in yourself that you created your own business. But it really breaks my heart to see you guys sometimes flying by the seat of your pants or not knowing where your cash is going or even which sales you should be chasing after. And I'm on a mission to help you guys create a thriving business, all while focusing on your family and having some life balance in there, right? And these sessions are specifically designed for your business. Please look at all of the other Accountable Live events and find ones that are applicable to your personal life. Money, as it turns out, overlaps between your business and your personal life. So look at those too, right? Again, my name is Lisa. I'm the Velocity Detective, and this is an Accountable Live event. Janice is my co-host today. Janice, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Janice Zimba. I have Open Paths Financial Coaching, and I'm thrilled to be here with Lisa. We like to hang out on Thursday afternoons and learn and share business. So we're grateful everybody's here. And just as a welcome that we are Accountable is a network of the most respected money coaches, and these events are a free resource for you to get to know us. And I know there's a lot of coaches here, but to share with your clients and friends to join us. This session is focused, as we said, on Profit First with the panel, which is a new format for us. So we're super excited about that. And we want to know that we are financial coaches. We are not selling any insurance or investments or any products. This is purely for entertainment and educational purposes. So I think most of us by now know how Zoom works. But we'll be on mute. But if you want to say something and participate, just kind of raise your hand, and I'll be watching the chat and the Zoom and everything else. So have a great session. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, Janice. So today's discussion is actually a panel about the book Profit First. Mike M. has written this fantastic book about how to shift your mindset from bringing in sales, minusing your expenses, and then whatever is left over might be in your back pocket, right? Instead of that mindset of just what's left over, you actually kind of start a little bit more flipping it on its head, right? Where you think about, okay, what do I want out of it in my back pocket first? And then how do I back into those numbers? It's also going to help you think about a little bit more discipline on where you spend your money and when, as well as a little bit like managing some targets and having some other disciplines in your business so that it can be more profitable. On the panel today, I have with me Lauren, Josh, and Scott. Lauren, why don't you take a minute to introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you do.
Sure. Well, I'm really excited to be here. I'm Lauren, and this is my 5th year of financial coaching. Started out with purely working on the personal side of finances, and really had zero business background 5 years ago, didn't know what I was doing. And like you said, Lisa, flying by the seat of your pants, I could definitely relate to that. And so, as a new financial coach, I didn't even pay myself for the first like 2 years until I read the Profit First book, and it completely changed everything. So, more about that later, but that's why I'm really excited to be here today.
Josh, what about you? Who are you and what do you do?
Hey, name's Josh Shum. I am a financial coach who's pretty much evenly split between business and personal. And I have run a multi-million-dollar business, which is what kind of attracted me to the personal side. And I have a business, Steward Don't Squander. You can find that at stewarddon'tsquander.com. And I help businesses with profits, processes, and personnel.
Awesome, awesome. Scott, who are you and what is it that you do?
Sure. So my name is Scott Mader, and my business is Inspired Stewardship. So I've been coaching since 2011, so 10 years. I've been a full-time coach since 2017. So this is what my wife and I do as our full-time business. I work kind of like Josh. I probably work about 50-50 with small business and with personal clients. And my one-liner is I help Christian men and couples master their time, their talent, and their treasures so that they can live out their calling.
Okay. Now we're going to get to a little bit about how you guys thought about Profit First. We're going to mix up the order a little bit and go backwards. Scott, all right. What in your personal background gave you, like, led you into the Profit First line of thinking?
So kind of like Lauren was saying earlier, I read the book is actually my first introduction to the idea of it. What's interesting is kind of, I've actually run my own businesses since I was 12 years old. I opened my first small business when I was 12, and I've always kind of done my bookkeeping backwards. I just didn't know I was doing it backwards in that I always had the philosophy of setting aside some money first for the business and for taxes and for other things like that. And then, making sure I was also taking money from the very, very beginning. I've always tried to design a business that way, it just, that's kind of how I gravitated to it because my father was a small business owner and that's, always kind of how he did it. So I didn't really know the terminology and I wasn't doing it exactly the way that Mike lays out in Profit First, but I was closer to that than I was to actual, quote, general accounting principle kind of bookkeeping, just naturally. So I was attracted to it when I read it.
Lauren, what about you? You mentioned already a little bit, but could you dive a little bit deeper into your personal experience?
Yeah, for sure. So I should have also mentioned about half my clients now are also business coaches or business coaching working on, implementing Profit First. But the way that I got into it was 2 years into coaching, it was really a glorified hobby. I mean, to be honest, because I wasn't actually paying myself anything. I thought that I was being smart, reinvesting back into the business to try to grow it to a point where I felt like I had earned the right to take some money home as income. So when I read Profit First, it completely shifted my thinking around business expenses and my own personal salary. And so that was when I committed. I'm taking home a monthly salary no matter what, and started to get organized from there. And it changed the way that I looked at my expenses. It gave me a framework for looking at where I was putting money into the business and put some good guardrails around that so they didn't increase as my revenue increased. And that's when I first really took myself seriously as someone who runs their own business and just doesn't do this as like a little hobby. So along the way, I found that several of my clients coming in for personal finance coaching, the root cause of their disorganization was that they were business owners and they didn't even know how much to put on that top line of income. They had no idea. They just, well, I just take money from my business account whenever I need money. And that was it. So
Yeah,
I saw
that's
a big opportunity to serve. And it's been amazing. I just said, one client put it perfectly. He said, wow, it looks like the numbers suddenly feel three-dimensional. You know, they start telling a story, like it comes to life and they make sense. So yeah, it's an absolutely transformational system.
That's a very common entrepreneurial saying. Oh, I just take money from the business when I need it. And that's definitely a mindset thing that once you get past the point where, no, I need to be paid for doing my business. I earned that. It changes not only how your business is run, but your self-worth also, increasing
Absolutely.
that. Josh, what about you? What in your personal background kind of led you to the profit first thought process?
Yeah, I think the explicit process, reading the book, but unlike Scott, I actually ran my businesses the more normal way where sometimes you haphazardly take money out of your business and then you kill your business when you accidentally spend all your money that was for running the business. I did that when I was 14 to 16. I killed a couple of my businesses, and I didn't really know why they died, except that I had spent all the money and there wasn't cash flow. And so that cemented in me early that, hey, you need cash flow. And when I started coaching people, I learned like, man, most business owners are haphazardly and they think they're doing a good thing. They believe that they're leaving and reinvesting, or whatever term you want to put on it, money into the business. And that's kind of true, but then they'll haphazardly take out money when they need it. And usually they wait too long and it's an inopportune time for the business. And like Lauren was saying, the perspective is really all messed up by the business owner. And as a coach, I thought, hey, I need to bring myself to higher accountability, even though I was running and call it a quasi profit first system where I was moving money out and stuff. So I was going to test it. And so I tested it to see work for businesses or not. And it has proven itself out to the tune of last year, the average turnaround for my businesses was 150 grand per business in 1 year.
That is amazing.
Not because, yeah, not just because the system is magic, but to what Lauren and Scott were getting at. Like it changes the mindset of the owner to where, oh, this business is supposed to pay me, then I have to run it differently. And we get a little bit lazy a lot of times and we think we're doing the right thing, only it's misguided.
Scott, I'm sure you get a lot of questions from from clients about profit first. Like, what's the most common one you get?
Yeah, I think, well, it depends on where they are in the process, actually. So if they're already familiar with it, maybe they've already read the book, or someone's kind of taught to them about it, then usually the question is often, quote, semi-mechanical, meaning it's the, wait, how do I actually do this? What percentages do I use? And we'll talk more about that later. What mechanically do I move from what? But the other one, the conceptual one, is if they have already implemented or begun to implement, and they kind of understand what we're doing here in terms of setting aside money for profit, setting aside money for taxes, setting aside money for operations, setting aside money to pay yourself, these sorts of categories. The most common one that I actually really like is, wait, what do I actually do with the profit? And what, as in, because it's fun, because the question can really immediately come down to, well, what do you think you should be doing with the profit? And you can actually have a question more about, well, what do they dream for the business? What are they thinking about in terms of opportunities? What, and for themselves personally too, because you can use profit a number of different ways. But it turns it on its head from, profit is what's left over, to profit is something that I actually generate and plan. And that's the mindset shift that I think separates this from, a lot of the other sorts of ways of going about it.
Lauren, what about you? What's the most common question you get?
Yeah, to echo Scott, it definitely depends on where we're at in the process. I'd say people who are first, first meeting, it's more of a, here's sort of all the puzzle pieces, what do I do? And what it really does boil down to, how do I know how much to pay myself every month? How can I get peace around my personal finances when I don't really know what's going on in the business? And that's sort of what we boil it down to and identify. And then I'd say the second question, once we do a profit assessment where we break it down, like where is the money actually going? And then what are those target allocation percentages? Like where should the money be going? Then their question is, well, how am I going to do that? Because they can't usually just flip the switch and say, okay, well, from now on, I'll just do that. There's usually a lot of factors and it's going to be a process. So they're usually like, well, that sounds great, but I don't see how I can make those changes to make it happen.
And so having a coach like you or Scott or Josh can help them get it implemented a little bit more efficiently than if they tried to just follow the book. In addition to that, like having a coach always helps hold you accountable, right? How many self-help books have we read and we know what to do and didn't,
Mhm. Yeah, it's a lot more about, okay, well, we've identified the what. Now we're going to identify not only the how, but then put that accountability and really systematize it and break it down in incremental steps so that it's very doable, so that it's not, well, how do I decrease my expenses by 50% over the next 4 quarters? It's a combination of how do we increase your revenue, increase your profit, decrease your expense. It's all these different levers that we're going to pull over time. And identifying the mindset piece is super important too. I was just having a conversation last week with a new client. It was our first session and he sort of brought up this, I've got this, he's a personal trainer. And he said, there's this trainer that I'm friends with in a different city and I'm charging $60 an hour and she's charging $90. So we talked about that and about what's the real value of what you're offering. And so on the spot, he decided to raise his prices to $75 the next day. And we figured out that's going to bring him an extra like $25,000 in revenue without increasing expenses at all. So it's identifying those types of things that I think are really powerful in the coaching process.
Josh, I've already seen in the chat that you agreed with Scott that was your number one like question that people have. Well, then what's your number two, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, the first one that Ron brought up actually is great. Do people actually open all the accounts? Do I need to open all the accounts? Well, if you want to follow this system, like I don't want to be a jerk about it, but if you want to follow this system, then yeah. And information is not the same as implementation, right? Like Lauren was saying, information is out there. You can read a book, you can do whatever. Implementation is where the rubber meets the road. I was doing some extensive reading for some seminars on innovation, and they have innovation practices and innovation outcomes. And people just want the outcome, but they often don't want to do the practices that facilitate the outcomes. And just knowing about innovation doesn't do anything for you really, except make you feel like you're a failure or whatever. And Dwayne brought up a nice point here. Often business owners kind of feel like profit's a dirty thing to obtain. And almost all of the people I come across with Profit First are not familiar with it in business coaching. I'm not seeking them out on the basis of Profit First, but on the basis of they work usually really long hours and they often don't see anything or don't see anything consistently except failure or the feeling of failure. And so it is funny because I'm asking them to do a weird thing in the first week or two. Go open a bunch of bank accounts. How does this help me? It seems like you're making this more complex, not easier. You told me this would simplify things. What's going on? So I have to do a little more hand-holding on that stage than most others. And then, yeah, down the road, they freak out a little bit maybe about target allocations versus current allocations or whatever. But I make a point to, with the people I coach, I send them to one of these people that I've coached along the way. And most of these people stick around with me for over a year. So it's easy enough to have a current client that they can talk to and say, hey, what's this guy smoking? Like, is it legit or not so much? And
Josh,
that is helpful.
Josh, explain for the people that don't know the Profit First methodology, what you mean by having a bunch of bank accounts open.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of variety here, and I was just rereading about the personal side of things, but I think this is freshest than Lauren's mind, so I'm going to defer to her and put her on the spot with this.
Sure. Okay, no problem, Josh. Happy to pick up. Yeah,
How does the bus need oil changing while you're under there? Just checking. No, never mind. Sorry.
no, it's all good. And I mean, just to echo Josh a little bit, if you want a little coach confession, when I first read Profit First and started implementing it, I didn't implement it 100%. I was like, I'm not going to do the bank account thing. I'll just keep track of it on a spreadsheet. And what I found was that I was still looking at that bank account to just like the balance sometimes when I would look at like, should I purchase this for my business or whatever. And so it was easy to like fall back into old habits. Whereas when you do set up your bank accounts, which I'll explain how that works, when you have a bank account that is specifically set up only for operating expenses and nothing else, it forces you to really stick to what you're saying. And if you're going to go over and above what your operating expense budget is supposed to be, then you actually have to transfer money from either the profit account or from your owner's compensation account. And it forces you to be really real about what you're doing. So it provides a level of accountability you don't get from having everything in one account. So the 5 accounts that you set up when you start Profit First, one is revenue. And that's just where all your money comes into. That's like the bank account most of us have. That's like the serving platter. Think of like your Thanksgiving dinner. That's where the turkey goes. But nothing is gonna come out of revenue. It's all gonna get divided into smaller plates. So the 4 other bank accounts are those smaller plates. So that's your operational expenses or OpEx, profit, taxes, and owner's compensation. And so twice a month, once a month, up to once a week, however you want to do it. You can do it on the 5th and 20th. I like to do my books on like the 1st and 15th, but it doesn't matter. You can pick your own rhythm, but you go in there, you get your profit, you look at what's in your revenue, and then you take a percentage of that revenue and assign it to every category, every bank account. And so you transfer everything into those bank accounts, and you pay yourself out of the owner's comp and that sort of thing.
Excellent, excellent. So Scott, if you had just one tip that you could like throw out there for us today, what would it be?
One tip. Well, I think a lot of it, and again, I think knowing where you're probably going next, think I'm jumping ahead. A lot of it is recognizing that part of the key to this is dialing those percentages in that Lauren just talked about. There's some recommended places you can start, but they're going to be different for different people and different businesses, and they change. It's not a fixed, it always stays the same. It may change as your business grows and adapts and changes as well. Kind of along the Lauren thing, Coach Confessional, I've done it with the bank accounts. I've done it without the bank accounts. I've had clients that fight against the bank accounts. And so we're like, okay, fine, don't do it with the bank account right now. And then eventually they usually open the bank accounts anyway, because they figure out that it's harder than they thought. And it's kind of like credit cards. It's not I don't come in and go, this is the only way to do it, but I'm going to talk to you about the pros and cons. And more often than not, a lot of times they end up changing their behavior to match with what I would have ordered them to do, but they do it because they wanted to instead of because somebody told them. So it is a matter of dialing in those percentages and kind of operating with this, committing to it for a period of time. This is one of those things too that I don't think you go halfway. If you're going to do it, implement the system, implement it fully, commit to it, do it for 6 months and see where you're at. Do it for a year and see where you're at. Don't just, you can't really dabble in it. It is kind of a different way of running your books and running your business, from a math perspective and a mindset perspective. So if you want to try it, implement it, stick with it, and and then make it a decision once you've got enough data.
Lauren, what about you? If there was just like one really good tidbit, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say that take the approach that you would when you're organizing a closet. Like, it's going to take a little bit of more effort up front. This is the comparison I like to use when I say, yeah, you're going to go open 5 bank accounts. Yeah, it's going to take you a few hours. You might have to go to a couple different banks and credit unions, that won't look at you cross-eyed when you tell them, I would like 5 business bank accounts, checking accounts, please, with 0 fees and 0 minimum balances. But there are good ones that will do it for you. And yeah, it's going to take you a little time and effort on the up front, but it's going to save you time and effort, throughout the lifespan of your business. So my advice is, like, just do it. Like, don't overthink it. Know that it is worth your time. It's that time investment is worth it, and it will pay off. And it does make things so much simpler. And it maximizes your profitability. So it's good for you as a business owner, both in terms of time and money.
Josh, what's your little tip you can leave us with today?
Mike says this in his book, but I like it more broadly on the personal side as well. The worst enemy of profit first is you, the business owner. So get either a coach to help you with it or an accountability partner of some sort, because doing it doesn't work out real well. Like, probably you should do nothing at all. It depends on how you are, I guess. And then you're probably really just not going to be fully into it, or you're going to miss a step or whatever. And this can be a real game changer. This should start you. So there's a big gap actually between big business. I've worked in Fortune 100 companies and mid-sized companies and small $3-5 million companies and such. Small businesses don't often budget forward looking. When you think about like personal finance, we say, hey, make a budget. It's a tool towards your wealth, towards achieving your goals. Small businesses often are just looking backwards at their accounting statements. How did I do? I busted my butt. Did I get lucky this month? Like, did the roulette wheel land on red or black this month, kind of thing? And that's sad. It's normal, but it's sad. And so don't let your own worst enemy, you, the person in the mirror, also your best friend, you, the person in the mirror, help yourself out by getting either an accountability partner or a coach to guide you through the beginning, which is often the toughest part, right? You learn habits the right way, the best way, things tend to work out better. You learn weird form of doing something or whatever, people laugh at you for a long time. And I can speak to that through several personal experiences. But with Profit First, I think it makes it a lot easier. Hey, let's forward look and start to budget and plan for our business and things like that. It's part of the system, really. And now we're behaving like a real business. We're making money like a real business. And things tend to work out well because you have those rewards, those profit bombs, or whatever you want to call them, as a sign of you are serving people well in your business.
And you are a fantastic business owner, and you have a great product, you have a great service that helps other people in their lives, and you deserve to be paid for that, right? Sometimes some of the mindset is I'm not good enough to be paid, right? So this kind of helps with that a little bit. So So Scott, sometimes there's a little bit of a disconnect in people's minds between the words like revenue and income and profit. How would you help us understand those different terms, especially as it applies to Profit First?
Yeah, so kind of going back to those accounts that Lauren was talking about, revenue is where money flows into the business. So when a client writes you a check, that's the money that comes in. When you get paid for a speaking event, when you whatever, anything that causes dollars to flow into the revenue bucket is revenue. And then with Profit First, is we apply a set of percentages to that. So if I get paid $1,000, I take immediately 15% and it goes into the tax account. I take 5% and I'm making up these percentages. Don't take these as the percentages that you should use, 5%. And I put that into the profit account. I take a certain percentage to go into the owner's pay, and I take or owner's compensation, and a certain amount to go into operating. And I think one of the mistakes that we make is we think of that revenue number, that money that came in, as our personal income. So if the business got paid $1,000, I made $1,000. And one of the things that Profit First helps you do is, no, your business made $1,000, but then there's expenses. That's what the operating expenses are for. There's taxes. That's what the tax account is for. There's, other things that you may want to do. That's one of the things that the profit account is for. And then of course you also want to pay yourself. That's what owner's pay is for. And so that owner's pay, if you're talking about income from the point of view of personal income, what can I take home? That's really coming out of that account only. And again, from a mindset perspective, it's really cool when you get to the point where there's actually money left over in the owner's pay account. Especially like in a really good month, you put extra money into the owner's pay account, because now all of a sudden when you get to the summer month or something where it's not as good, you just keep paying yourself. And you can put yourself on quote salary from an income perspective. You pay yourself when months are good, you pay yourself when months are bad, as opposed to the idea of, I look at my I look at my banking account for my business and go, oh, that's how much I can take home this month, which is what most of us do, at least at the beginning. Take it all home, and then next month you're struggling because either you don't get a new client or you've got expenses all of a sudden that come up that aren't, you didn't plan for, you didn't recognize, or you didn't realize were going to be there, and now you're short. I think I answered your question. I lost track in the middle. Sorry.
It was more of a question, and Lauren and Josh, you guys jump in too. Like, how can we make sure we understand the difference between revenue and profit and income? What are all those words mean when we're talking about Profit First? Lauren, go.
Okay. So this is another thing I really like about the system, is that it clearly defines things for you. And Lisa, I'm sure, as a CPA, like sometimes the terminology that we need to use, like for taxes and things, it's a different language. Like it's just a different set of information. It's important, but it's not always like the same as what a business owner needs to use to make decisions about their business, right? So being able to be clear about what these mean and how to understand those numbers around your business is the thing that really empowers you to make those good decisions. So profit is, most of the time we think of profit as whatever is left over after all my expenses come out. That's profit. That's for me, or that's for, whatever else if I want to reinvest. And this really, profit in the Profit First system really guardrails what profit is and clearly defines it as, you've targeted a certain percentage of that revenue to be profit. So that is not owner's compensation, that is not business expenses, and it's not going to be used for taxes, because when you've got your tax account, you don't have to worry about being hit with a big tax bill in April, because there's no surprises. You've got, your CPA will love you, right? Like everything is there, quarterly taxes, all good to go. So with profit, you can use it for a number of things. You can use it, a common recommendation is use half for a business emergency fund and give yourself a quarterly bonus, use 50% as a quarterly bonus. You can use that as money, if you want to take a little risk, like let's say that you've never tried, Facebook advertising, that's something you really want to do. You can look at your profit account and say, all right, this is my budget to try something with. You're not increasing your operational expenses. You're keeping those in proportion to what a financially healthy business is going to do. But you can take some of that profit and make a decision that I'm gonna branch out. I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna buy this software and see, if I get a good ROI on it, then I can increase my operating expenses because it's not changing as a percentage, but I'm getting that good ROI. So that profit account is protected, and it gives you the ability to grow your business in a smart financial way, and also give yourself profit bonuses.
I'm loving that bonus idea. Let's get that going. Josh, do you have any additional words to put on those revenue terms?
Well, not directly to the accounts, but business owners I've found over the last decade, we like talking about the sexy number, the big number. I have a $5 million business. That's great. How much profit do you take home? I'm reinvesting it in my business. Not much, whatever. I have coached businesses and know of businesses that bring in, say, $15, $20 million in revenue, which, like, I'm touting my jersey here kind of thing. And then you get into it and they're taking on debt because they can't cover all of their spending in a year. That stinks. But they're still looked at as successful entrepreneurs or whatever, and I'm not picking on them. They're good at sales. They just need some help with profit probably. And so when you apply this formula, it forces growth in the entrepreneur and growth in how you look at things, because you might have a product category you need to cut because it's not profitable when you actually evaluate it. But that's hard to do. We don't want to look at it and cut out something that we like or whatever. Or I have clients who not have to, but virtually have to raise their price on a service 25, 35, 50% sometimes, because it doesn't make any sense for them to offer that service otherwise. And when you apply the profit first methodology, the numbers kind of bring that to the surface, like Lauren was saying, 3D, like it just makes it that much more real, and they start to see things. I have a CPA of one of my profit first clients who, after the first 8 months of working with me, they said, 6 months, not 8 months. They said, I went into my CPA's office to drop off my accounting statements from QuickBooks, and the receptionist said, hey, the CPA wants to see you. And Kevin's like, crap, am I in trouble? And the CPA says, I don't know what you're doing, but your business is like 180 from last year. And it truly was. He was like negative $45,000 in profit the previous year in 2019 and 2020. This is through third quarter. For this figure, he was up 65 grand. So it was $110,000 turnaround, and his business was $280,000. And it wasn't because we had any magic. It was because we forced realities to be addressed, basically. And it was funny, like he had a CPA, and the CPA in this case just was, I'm going to call it the old school type of CPA, and they didn't really dive into the numbers. They were just plugging the numbers into a system, and they weren't trying to help the business owner grow. So sometimes I get the pushback. I've got a CPA. That's great. If you got a good CPA, you're set. If you have an okay or bad CPA, they're probably dragging you down, actually, because you think you've got it, and that illusion is very dangerous.
Yes, we do have to rely on, those wise counsel, because there's a lot of things that as a business owner, you just don't know what you don't know. And so really finding a CPA that wants to have that proactive personal partnership with you is really where you need to focus as a prudent business owner. And hey, Dwayne, I know that I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. He's one of our resident tax preparing experts. And so just real quick, can you help? We've talked about how revenue and profit for Profit First should be thought about. What about for the tax return? How is that different, especially for someone who's going to file a Schedule C?
I'm not sure I got your question. How is what different? How is?
Revenue, profit, that thought process.
Oh, well, yeah. I think again, it's back to what Josh says. Most people, it's the same thing as their personal stuff. Most people can tell you exactly what their gross salary is. Very few people can tell you what they put in the bank, and every month. I make 100 grand a year. Yeah, but how much does that gets to your bank account? Oh, well, I don't know. Same problem with the business guy. They talk about that big number. My Schedule C did $100,000 last year. Well, what does that mean you made? Well, this tax return says I made 42,000. Now that was not the question. The question was, what did you make? Oh, well, I don't have any idea. So it's an education process. And Profit First is great in the it educates a entrepreneur how to be a real entrepreneur instead of just somebody who owns the business they have a job at. And that's the mindset you get out of. So it's I'm a big believer. I don't know if I answered your question.
Just a little bit, like on Schedule C, line 31 is your net profit number for your tax return. Can you think about how to explain how that's different than the word profit from Profit First?
Oh, sure, yeah. The net profit for your tax return has nothing to do with what you put in that profit account. So what you're doing by having that profit account is you're saying that I am going to operate, price, and run my business so that every dollar I bring in, 10% of that, 2% of that, 41% of that is profit, whatever the number is you decide. And so your mindset shifts. You can then give a rip what's on that Schedule C. What you want to know is when I look over there in ABC Bank on the 30th of March, how much dough can I put in the sack and walk out with, right? That's the beauty of it all, because it helps you begin to think about this. I'm in this for profit. And that number, what's on a tax return, has little to no relevance to that number in the law, in the management of the business.
Absolutely, absolutely. The only tie that I could possibly see that it has is that that's actually what you're going to pay taxes on. And so that brings me to those percentages that you guys have been kind of alluding to. And from my understanding, this is actually one of the most difficult parts to address in the Profit First in implementation is these percentages. Scott, in the chat, you mentioned that following the book might be the easiest thing to do at the beginning.
Yeah, the question was asked, are the percentages that are listed in the book a good place to start? And my answer was, it's not a bad place to start. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll work. But the book actually walks you through, and Josh or Lauren or I can walk you through kind of how to take recommended percentages that are in the book and then actually kind of back end it and logic it to figure out if those will work for you as a starting place. But and honestly, Lisa, your earlier question, real quick, I want to circle back to that. So I think what you're referencing is that in, quote, general accounting principles, it's revenue or sales minus expenses equals profit. That's the formula. So revenue is the top of the bot line and profit's the bottom of after you subtract everything, including your pay. That's part of your expenses. And Profit First says instead to think of it as sales minus profit equals expenses. So that you first set aside money for profit before you pay yourself or do other things. And so that's that's the equation that he makes a big deal out of is a different mindset. So that might have been actually the question you asked me earlier that I didn't understand the question correctly. But yeah, you can start with those. You can start with those percentages that are in the book. So as an example, for a lot of people, that 15% for taxes works pretty well. And immediately people will go, but wait a minute, when I look at my tax form, my percentage that it says on my tax form is higher than 15%. So how can setting aside 15% be enough money for taxes? And the thing that they forget is on your Schedule C, you also have things that are deductions that you can take out of the business before you pay taxes. And so, 15% is kind of a rule of thumb starting place. I will tell you, I've seen businesses where that number is not the right percentage. So you do have to do some work to figure out if it's right. But it's, especially for a smaller business or when you're first starting out, probably usually a pretty decent place to start with. At the worst case scenario, you have more money in your tax account than you actually need to pay taxes.
Whoa.
That's, what do you know? You get to the end of the year and you've got money left over. And then the question is, what do you do with it? But but that's literally the worst. Actually, I have a client right now that's been doing Profit First. He's been setting aside money for taxes. CPA story again, Josh. He went to meet with the CPA, and the CPA is like, okay, well, you're going to need this much, and after you pay your quarterlies, this is how. And he's like, I got the money in the account, and he's like, well, but you're going to have to write, and you're going to need that. And he's like, I know, I've got the money in the account. And the CPA is like, but you'll have to, he literally told him 4 times how much he was going to pay. And the guy's like, finally, he's like, I have the money. I'll write a check. It's like, wait, what? Because he's just not used to that, because that's not how business owners usually operate. They get to the time to write a, $5,000 check for taxes and they don't have it. And now we're dealing with that problem, or a 20,000 or 10,000 or whatever. So it really does, and that's the first percentage that comes to mind for me. So we can go into the other ones, but I'll stop and let other people talk.
Lauren, why don't you address one of the other percentages that at least starts in the book?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll share like my own personal example. I made a little tweak to one of the percentages, but the basic recommendation for businesses who earn a revenue of under $200,000 a year, or like up to $200,000 a year, is to put 15% away for taxes, 5% of that revenue for profit, 50% for owner's compensation, and then 30% for operating expenses. And if you can do it if your operating expenses don't have to be 30%, you don't have to fill that up, to be 30%. You can have more for owner's compensation. So that's one way that, you can, especially for coaches, we don't have a lot of overhead. So that might be that's one way that you can adjust those numbers. And I really just view it as a starting point. For me, I decided let's make owner's compensation 40 or 45 and profit 10, because sort of what Scott was saying earlier about having money always in that owner's comp account. And then if you have a really big month, you don't necessarily take all of it. I just decided to organize it so I've got 10% profit, 45% owner's compensation. And then that way, every quarter, I can sort of assess what does the business need, what do I need, and keep things really balanced, since there are kind of higher and lower seasons in terms of getting newer clients. So that's really helped me balance things out, and that's okay to do. I think of it as anyone like to bake here? I love baking. I always have like a good food analogy for money. So if you like to bake bread, then you know that there's a basic recipe, but however, there are different factors you have to consider. I live in Denver. I have to adjust almost every bread recipe for altitude. So, it might take a little bit of adjustment here or there. Humidity affects, the bread, like different temperatures or oven temperatures. So you have to take all those factors into consideration. And you're going to find that you might make minor adaptations to those percentages, but they're basically going to be the same. Like you're not going to make huge deviations from them, most likely.
Josh, what about you? That percentage question.
Yeah, so I think Lauren answered like the scope of it. And so maybe I'll give a more realistic example. Say you do, following what Lauren said about these $200,000 or less businesses, basically think $250,000 or less. You don't have to overthink this too much. Yeah, and the point is just start. But if you've got 45 grand in real revenue, and we haven't really talked about real revenue for a coach, that is your top line revenue. It really gets into when you have materials or subcontractors in like a manufacturing business, that real revenue means something different than the traditional revenue. But so $45,000, you're putting 5% to profit. That means over the course of the year, you put $2,250, if my math is right, to your profit. Your owner's compensation at that 50% mark, well, 50% of 45 grand is 22.5, and you've got 67.50 in the tax account, and you've got operating expense limits at 13.5. And like Lauren said, you don't need to spend 13.5. You can, but often, like when people don't start this when they're smaller, we're really having to start to cut a ton of things to get OpEx to where it needs to be. So it's a fine thing to have not the opposite problem, because again, you don't need to build it to that, but to have to where you don't need to fill that OpEx, and that's fine. With taxes, just one cautionary thought: you're paying your quarterly estimates, correct me if I'm wrong, but based off of last year, kind of, right? Based off of last year's performance and stuff. And so if you're growing your profit looking forward, and we're increasing our profit and we're changing these allocations, that forward looking, it's okay if you have money left in the tax account, because you probably will have more taxes to pay in. That's not bad. Taxes are an indication of making a profit.
In fact, I want you to have to pay more taxes. I want you to have to write a check for $350,000 next year. Okay, why? Because imagine if your tax bill was $350,000 and you were following profit first and already paying in your quarterly taxes. Can you imagine what your gross revenue would be, and what your, better yet, profit and your owner's compensation? Okay, I just got all chilled. Okay. Hey,
Yeah, people forget there is not 100% tax bracket. At least not yet. There's not 100% tax bracket.
not yet.
Under any political party. there's
Under any party, there is currently not 100% tax bracket. So I don't care who's in office. I don't care what's going on. At least, that has not happened yet. When it does, that changes the picture. But meaning, if you have to pay taxes, it should mean you made more money than that. Now, again, the problem is if you're not setting aside money for pay and for other things correctly, you can have a big tax bill and have no money. It is entirely possible. just like people can, be making $1 million and have $190,000 in debt. And people are like, how's that possible? How can you spend more? Oh no, you trust me. You can spend more than you make. I don't care how much you make.
We've got a few minutes left. Does anybody in the audience have any questions about Profit First or what I had for breakfast this morning? These sessions really are normally a very interactive type of thing, where it's actually coaching you to run your business better. I hope that you guys really enjoyed having Lauren, Scott, and Josh on with us today. I certainly really now have a better grasp of if you're going to do it, you should go pretty much all in and try it out. Try it out, like Scott said, for 6 months, right? For 12 months. If it doesn't work for you after that, hey, pick the pieces that did work and, make a shift. Be willing to change those percentages. Make sure that you talk to your wise counsel, get a CPA that does have that proactive personal partnership with you. Get a banker that has that proactive personal partnership with you so that you can talk to them about implementing this in the right way. If you guys are interested in utilizing Scott or Lauren or Josh, you guys, Scott, give me your contact information so people can get a hold of you.
Yeah, you can always just email me, scott@inspiredstewardship.com, or go to that website, inspiredstewardship.com. There's a calendar link on there that'll take you to a Calendly. If you're in, Coach Connections, you can also go into any of the hubs and you'll find my calendar link in those too. So they all go to the same place.
Lauren, what about you? How can people get a hold of you if they really want to bump up their game?
Yeah, so you can send me an email. It's lauren@laurenrilling.com. Rilling is RILLING. Or if you just want to like schedule a time to meet, my direct calendar is laurenrilling.com/talk.
Josh, real quick, tell us how we can get a hold of you.
Josh@stewarddon'tsquander.com, and I'll put my Calendly in the chat so you don't have to try too hard. You want
Awesome.
30
awesome.
minutes.
I like not trying too hard. Hey, Kira, you had a question. What do you got?
So I have a crisis client, and she is a photographer, wedding photographer, small business owner. So she took a pretty big hit this past year with the pandemic. Our first 2-hour deep dive is on Monday, and I'm curious if should we kind of, I know you guys said, to kind of dive into the profit first thing as far as like her business side of things. We haven't really discussed me talking about her business per se. It's pretty much personal finances right now. Would you recommend holding off on the business side and profit first approach until she kind of gets her personal finances in a little bit, like maybe in a couple weeks, 30 days, when we've worked that personal budget, then maybe start working into the profit first for her business side?
That's actually a great question, right? Personally, I'm not sure where I'm at, on my personal spending plan. Do I get my personal stuff in order first, or do I do my business, or do I do them at the same time? Scott, what would you do?
So for most small business owners, the answer is business and personal are always intimately connected. So think of it more as the snake that's biting its own tail. Start where you can start, but trust that you're probably going to end up being unraveling both, because very seldom, and I'm not here necessarily talking about, do they have, a business account, a personal account, or, though honestly, that's a problem too. Oftentimes they're just dumping all the money into one place. So I'm not talking about physical separation of money. I'm literally talking about mental separation of money. More often than not, it is just, not separated at all. They see the business money as their personal money. They're, when they need to dump personal money back into the business, they do that. It's a mess. So start where you have permission to start, which right now it sounds like is on the personal side, but be open to continuing to kind of ask questions and uncover. And as you can, trust me, she's going to open up, and you're going to discover you're going to have to work on the business side too. And that would be a fine time to implement that conversation of, here's another way we can look at the business side too.
Thank you.
So my name again is Lisa. I am the Velocity Detective. This was a phenomenal panel. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Josh, for coming on Accountable Live so that we can talk about how to empower the business owners to create a thriving business while focusing on their family. The Profit First is an absolutely great way to do it. Janice, thank you as always for being my co-host. And if you guys want, every Thursday at noon, I host another event somewhat similar to this. Again, it's free. You do have to sign up for it, and make sure you look at all of those other things on Accountable Live. There are some fantastic things on the personal side about building your legacy and so forth. If you want a copy of this video, you do need to email me, Lisa@visionating.com. You can also pop onto my website, www.visionating.com. You can pop over, shoot Janice an email, she can get it to me. But thank you so much, you guys, for participating. Again, the panelists were great. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody. And see you guys next Thursday at noon.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.